Hi there VC, Steve Whitty here. We're time for another video. It's a video with a difference. This is I'm going to be looking at the career of Marillion from 1979 to 1988. It sort of encompasses their beginnings up until the period when Fish left the band. The idea came to me. I'd shown a Marillion album in a video last year, and James Griffiths mentioned, well, it'd be nice if somebody could do a video on Fish era Marillion. I thought about it, and I thought, New Year, Christmas came and went, New Year came in. I thought, you know what, I will sit down and put one together. So that's why I'm doing the video. So let's start in 1979. There was a band called Electric Gypsy that featured on drums Mick Pointer and bass Doug Irvine. They left the band in 79 to form Silmarillion. The name came from the Tolkien book, J.R. Tolkien book. As well as Pointer and Irvine, the first lineup also consisted of Neil Cockle on keyboards and Martin Jenner on guitar. The band were mostly inspired by Camel, very in the prog, and sort of ironies, they were sharing the sharing rehearsal rooms with the band. I think the band did come in and Camel did come in and watch them and offer them advice, whatever. The point was that the material was mainly instrumental, and they did play one gig, but Cockle and Jenner left after a row over equipment, so it left Pointer and Irvine to carry on. At this point, they recruited a new guitarist, Steve Rothery, and on keyboards, Brian Jellimon. And around this time, the band's name got changed. It eventually came up Marillion. Some suggest that it may have been something to do with copyright reasons, connected with the Tolkien estate. Band have never confirmed that. There we go. They rehearsed, played a couple of gigs. The next person to leave was Doug Irvine. He'd hit 25 years of age and decided he was never going to make it in a band. He needed to earn some money, so he left the group. He was replaced on bass by Diz Minnett from Scotland, who also had a friend with him called Derek William Dick, who is better known as Fish. Fish got the nickname because of the amount of time he used to spend in the bath, which used to annoy people, particularly his landlord or something like that. So that both Minnett and Fish had moved down from Scotland. Had answered an advert in one may have been Melody Maker, and got the gig, and they relocated. By the time in 1981, the band really started to knuckle down to business, rehearsing and playing their first gig at the Red Lion pub in Bicester. The band was starting to get more ambitious and becoming more ambitious, but the problem is when you get more ambitious, you then start to look at things and you look at your weakest link, and it just so happens that Brian Jellimon was that man. Because Steve Rothery and Fish and Diz Minnett had relocated to be within the band, they were very more professional, driven. They'd given up a lot, excuse me, to be in the band, and I think they were having personality clashes with Jellimon, and Fish frankly didn't think his keyboard playing was up to a good standard. On one of their early gigs, there was a support band called Chemical Alice who had featured on keyboards Mark Kelly. Fish and Pointer approached Kelly about joining the band, and when Kelly came into a rehearsal and Jellimon saw him, that's when they told Jellimon he was fired. So the band was getting, all the pieces were starting to slowly come together. The band was starting to build up momentum. They'd even got themselves a session on the BBC Radio 1 Friday rock show. Fish was finding his legs as a singer. He was becoming more charismatic. He was starting experimenting with costumes and makeup, and this was leading to comparison with Peter Gabriel, and the band was getting compared to Genesis. However, they found another weak link, and the next to be kicked out was This Minute. Fish was a bit not too keen because he obviously was his mate. They'd come down together, but the rest of the band thought just wasn't good enough. And Fish says, "Okay, if that's going to be the case, I'll fire him," and which he did before a gig. And This Minute just walked off. So they played that gig without a bass player. He would be replaced by Pete Travaus, and that is sort of like the first recorded lineup come together. At this point, the momentum was building, and new lineup was getting a queue of record companies together, and one of those was actually Charisma, home to Genesis. But in the end, they ended up signing for EMI. In 1982, they released their first single, their debut single, Market Square Heroes. This is my 12-inch copy. It's a song about civil unrest, led by a charismatic leader during a period of high unemployment. It reached number 60 in the charts, which is not bad for a first single. The cover is by an artist called Mark Wilkinson, the Jester. He would have designed the majority of the covers. Probably the most remarkable track on here is side 2 on the 12-inch single. They included Grendel, which was a 17-minute song based on the tale of Beowulf, and it was the highlight of the band's live set at that time. It's quite, and this is where some of this Genesis comparisons. Marillion were in sort of like the lead of a sort of like a new wave of prog acts that were coming through at the time, and the track Grendel sort of highlighted it. It was that big proggy moment. Cleverly though, I think the band decided that they didn't want to be defined by that track, and within the year they dropped it from their live set. In fact, when I first saw them in March 1983, that song wasn't featured, but there's some die-hard Marillion fans that still call out for it, whether it be at Marillion gigs or at Fish gigs. So that was the single. They released another single, He Knows You Know, which was an anti-drug song. But then in March 1983, they released their debut album, Script for a Jester's Tear. This is basically material that they got called together from when they started. It reached number 7 in the UK album charts. So you got Script for a Jester's Tear, He Knows You Know, The Web, which is a song about being stuck in a bed sit, and you can see from the image here that the Jester is in a rather grubby bed sit. And then you've got Garden Party, which would become a bit their first top 20 single. Chelsea Monday, a song about an actress that jumps off, who committed suicide by jumping off a bridge. And Forgotten Sons, which is about a song about soldiers dying in Northern Ireland. As I said, this album, the material came about from years of gigging and rehearsing. And in the 1997 CD reissue, Brian Jellimon and Diz Minute both get some songwriting credits. They didn't on the initial album, but they did on the reissue. They did their first major tour, but again, probably the biggest coup de grace. The rest of the band felt that Mick Pointer was the weak link. The record company saw it as well, and the manager saw it. And so they fired him. They fired the last original member of the band was fired. He took that very hard pointer, which I could understand. It was his band, effectively being kicked out of his own band, and it's yeah. I could imagine I'd be very very pissed off myself. He went on. He's been playing in a band called Arena for the past 20 years, so he licked his wounds and sort of disappeared, and he went off again, start again. So after Pointer was fired, they initially brought in Andy Ward from Camel to sort of do the live dates, and it didn't work. He struggled. I think, I'm not sure, but I think there was Andy Ward did have a addictions issue at that point. They had tried a couple of other drummers. Eventually, they settled down with Ian Mosley, who had played with Steve Hackett. So the stable lineup of the band is now complete. So in March 1984, they released their second album, Fugazi. I think it's somewhat slang for they fucked up. And you can tell from the cover, things are slightly the change for the Jester. He's got on, he moved up in life, he's got better apartments. But this album saw the band move away from the prog. This was more of a sort of like more of a hard rock, standard rock sound. But this album does sound rushed, and it was rushed. They'd been falling behind their recording schedule, and EMI were putting a lot of pressure on the band, and it does sound packed. There's some really good songs on here, like Assassin, which was a hit single, Punch and Judy, Incubus is another great song, but there's some patchy material on here as well. It reached number 5 in the charts. And it's as I said, it was sort of a patchy affair. The singles didn't chart as high as the band thought it would. Fish had wanted it to be a concept album, but the band sort of like said, nah, we'll just have it as songs. And I think maybe that sort of ended to sort of took to the sort of patchy nature of the album. November 1984 saw them release Reel to Reel, a mini live album, which featured gigs recorded at De Montfort Hall on the 5th of March, Leicester on the 5th of March, and the Spectrum in Montreal on the 19th and 20th of June. So you got on here Assassin, Incubus, Cinderella Search, which happened to be a B-side, Forgotten Sons, Garden Party, and Market Square Heroes. So it's a mini album. It was just sort of like a snapshot of how the band were at that point live. Really good. It's a really good live album actually. Well worth seeking out. The band went on in June 1985 to release Misplaced Childhood. This was the big breakthrough album. Recorded in Berlin, the album was to reach number 1 in the UK album charts, and it is a concept album. It's a concept album about lost love, sudden success, acceptance, and lost childhood. And it was conceived apparently by Fish after a 10-hour acid trip. So you can see the image on the cover of the boy. But it's also marked the end of the Jester. The Jester leaving the window, and sort of like the band were sort of moving on. The reason it was so successful because it spawned 2 top 5 singles. Kaylee reached number 2 in the charts, and so get the singles there. So we got Kaylee, reached number 2 in the UK singles charts, and then the follow-up single, Lavender, reached number 5. So going back to Misplaced Childhood, you've got basically songs, but Childhood Then really indicated about the loss of childhood. Heart of Midlothian, this is Fish sort of like singing about where he comes from. Heart of Lothian, it's sort of like that area around Edinburgh, Midlothian. There's the football team, Hearts. His full name, proper name is Heart of Midlothian. And then things like White Feather that ends the album. It's not up there with their best, but it is a good album. Then June 1986, they released this, and this was aimed for the. It's a sort of compilation EP called Brief Encounter. This was aimed at the US market. The band at that time were supporting Rush on their Power Windows tour. So you got on here Lady Nina, Freaks, Kaylee, Fugazi, and Script for a Jester's Tears. So it's a bit like a snapshot from a track from each album, and obviously Kaylee's on here as well. However, fame can bring its own problems. On the 6th of March 1986, there was a heinous crime took place known as the Ealing Vicarage Rape. Basically, a gang of burglars broke into a vicarage at St Mary's Church in Ealing, attacked and tied up the vicar, his daughter's boyfriend, and then smacked and attacked him, tied him up, and they raped his daughter. It was big news. It was a horrible crime. Marillion got caught up in this because one of the attackers was identified from having a web tattooed on his hand or something like that. And Marillion's sort of fan club's known as the Web. The information centre is known as the Web. And people start putting two together, about the band, being linking with the band. And I remember Fish being interviewed on breakfast television, about it, what he thought about it. This isn't, you're not best prepared at the best of time for fame and fortune, but then to have this thrown at you, it's almost sort of like saying you're in cahoots with the attackers, sort of thing. I can imagine it would have come to shock as him and the band. On a lighter note, around this period, the band were offered the chance to do the Highlander soundtrack, which they felt they had to turn down because they were touring a lot at that time. Ironically, one of those tours was a European tour supporting Queen, who went on to do the Highlander soundtrack. The final studio album that the Fish lineup, this lineup put together, was Clutching at Straws, released in June 1987. My view, the best album. It took me a long time to get into this album, but it is their best album. It's a darker album. Again, a concept album. I don't think Fame and Fortune has suddenly maybe it left its mark on the band, particularly Fish. The main character is a guy called Torch, who is out of work, whose life's a mess, and he seeks solace in the bottle. This is hence why they're in bars. Really great album. Things like Warm Wet Circles, Incommunicado, talking about fame, Sugar Mice, Happy Ending, White Russian. It's a corking album. I mentioned when I showed this album a few months ago, and you could feel me the glare. The photo. Now, if I go back, Mark Wilkinson, who did the cover, he wasn't unhappy, felt this was rushed, but I think it sums up the band, particularly at the time. Obviously, there's images of people, well-known, famous faces that like to drink or are no longer with us. I don't know if that was sort of metaphor. I think there's Dylan Thomas there, amongst others. But if you look at the album cover, you'll see Fish over there, apart from the rest of the band. Now, maybe it was nothing to look at the time, but there was a sort of two camps developing within the band. Fish was particularly unhappy with the management. He felt the band had been overworked, they were playing live too much, and he found out that because 20% of the gross was going to management. So the more they played, the more management got paid. The final straw for Fish was he found out about a proposed American tour, which the band would have had to take a loan, a £14,000 loan from their record company EMI to finance. And that was it for Fish. So he went to the band and said, look, I'm not happy with this, with the... And so they gave an ultimatum, gave the band an ultimatum. It's either him, or you either ditch me or you ditch the management. And the rest of the band sided with the management, and so Fish left the band. It's the sad ending to the band at that point. This was released, the Thieving Magpie, which was a double live album set, which has on the vinyl album, it's got side one of Misplaced Childhood. If you brought the CD version, you got a whole of Misplaced Childhood. It was a double CD set. It's around the time where trying to get people to buy CDs rather than records, they put more music on, took advantage of the fact it could hold more music. You've got He Knows You Know, Chelsea Monday, Jigsaw, Punch and Judy, Sugar Mice Fugazi, Script for Jester's Tears, Incommunicado, and White Russian on here as well. Good live album, and it's sort of a fitting way to end that era of the band. After Fish left the band, there were legal battles, and it meant that Fish and the rest of the band didn't really make contact until 1999. It was then Fish met the rest of the band over a Chinese meal or whatever, and I think it was all agreed that at that point excessive touring and the pressure from management really led to the split and the rift. But it didn't mean that he could resume the friendships, and Fish did perform Market Square Heroes with the band in August 2007. There was a concert called Hobbles on Cobbles, sort of free concerts, and Fish was playing, and the band couldn't resist doing Market Square Heroes, obviously because it was in Aylesbury where the band really got together. Despite this, both sides have categorically stated that there's no way there'll ever be a reunion. Fish has publicly said that Steve Hogarth's he does a great job on vocals for the band. And the band is totally different now to what it was with Fish. They've moved on. Fish has moved on. In fact, Fish has probably put out his best solo album recently. So there you go. That is Marillion, at 1979 to 1988. As I said, Marillion carried on. Great success with Steve Hogarth. Very much play their own. Both him and Fish have played their own fields. In fact, Fish, his last album, said that's it. I'm not going to record anymore. I'm going to sort of retire from the business. So there you go, VC. That is it. I hope you liked the video. I may have rambled on a little bit too much. I don't know. It's for you to tell. If you're new to the channel and you like what you see, click on the subscribe button. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Love the interaction, and feel free to leave a comment. I will get back to you. I can also be found on Instagram at Stevo, Stevo 120665. Steve Whitty on Facebook and Twitter, again Stevo 120665. Whatever you get up to, make sure you have a good one. Look after yourselves. Keep spinning. More importantly, keep smiling.